Good morning, everyone. How is everybody on this Hump Day Wednesday? My name is Lexi Schultz, and I'm your host for today. Hopefully, you've had coffee because we're going to have a very interesting chat this morning. Before we do begin, I'd like to remind everyone that we are streaming live on Facebook and Hopin. And if you have questions for the speaker today, please type it in on the chat box or of your preferred platform, and we'll try our best to address all of your questions to Saitem and, of course, to our guest speaker for today. So without further ado, Fame Plus welcomes you to yet another exciting session on reimagining the future of design. Today, we'll be talking business. How can we shape the future of our business model to adapt and thrive amid uncertainty? I'm sure that many of us are still thinking about how we can pivot and be ready for the challenges and opportunities that lie ahead. We are excited to learn more about this from none other than Karen Gibbs, the co-founder of Byhand Consulting. Karen's career has included working with nonprofit organizations, trade shows, export promotion agencies, international development organizations, and US brands. Wow, Karen, you've been very, very busy. At Byhand Consulting, she helps artisan enterprises develop export marketing strategies to increase sales in the US market and improve profitability, of course. She also works with US brands to develop ethical supply partnerships with artisan producers. Karen is very passionate about sharing her knowledge and connections with entrepreneurs worldwide, and she advocates for the importance of handmade products. And I think it's something that the Philippines is very, very good at. Previously, Karen has given a webinar on how business can forge ahead and be innovative amid uncertainty. Some of the insights that she shared before, which we will be revisiting today, include the importance of producing and innovating relevant products for changing consumer needs and preferences, honest, engaging, and authentic content on digital, something that's very, very important, and we've talked about it a lot in the recent days, and boosting investments on digital channels to reach your target market. Rethinking campaigns and product development with a renewed focus on accountability, sustainability, and of course, diversity as well. And creating a brand identity that not only markets your products very well, but it also works seamlessly with more digital tools available. Months after, I'm sure that we've learned more insights and gathered more observations to help rethink and reshape our business models for the future. Without further ado, let's all welcome Karen Gibbs.
Oh, Lexi, thank you so much for that warm introduction. It is really a pleasure to be back here with you all. I have just a really rich and very fulfilling history of working with Saitem and with exporters in the Philippines. I agree with you entirely. I think that the Philippines has such a rich artisan culture and artisan resources and artisan enterprises. It makes it so well positioned, as we will see in this presentation, for I think what the future market looks like, sort of as we navigate through these COVID times and as we emerge on the other side. So thank you, Lexi, for introducing me. Thank you to Saitem for inviting me here. I really hope that we can make this a productive and constructive conversation for everybody. My hope is to share a little bit of insight into what's happening today in the US market so that you can all feel a little bit more assured, right? Knowledge is power, and the more we can understand and see the reality of what's happening today, the more it feels like we can navigate forward. But I'm really looking forward to the discussion afterwards. That's my favorite part of these presentations, is when we can really get into a dialogue. So while I give this presentation, please be thinking in the back of your head of all those questions that we can answer for you and discuss. So Lexi, I look forward to continuing this conversation after the presentation. But if you want to go ahead and pull my presentation up, that would be great, and we can get started. So thank you again to Saitem for this very compelling topic. I think It's an interesting time, both for the most experienced export companies around the world, as well as for those newcomers, right? It doesn't matter kind of where you are on your spectrum of experience in terms of marketing. I think everybody is required right now to reshape your business model, given the realities of the marketplace today. And I will speak from the point of view of the US market because that's where I live and that's what I know best. But I hope as we talk through some of these points, you find points of reflection that also help you relate to the market in the Philippines or even your local market within the Philippines. So I think some of these topics are relevant no matter where you're trying to sell your product. One thing that I think is very unique about the times that we live in is that COVID has affected everybody all over the globe. I think Lexi, you and I were talking about this before we started, is that, you know, we have all been affected by this time and by this pandemic and this virus. So it helps us relate to each other better. And it helps us take examples of what's happening perhaps in the US market and apply it to what's happening in our own local markets and as well as the markets in the Philippines. So we can go ahead and get started with the next slide. So this is one of my favorite quotes of all time. I think probably this is now a 20-year-old quote, but it's from Peter Drucker, who's sort of considered a guru of marketing and business in the US. And he says the aim of marketing is to know and understand the customer so well that the product or service fits him and sells itself. So this is really so much at the core of my approach to marketing, which is let's really spend some time to think about what's happening in your target market. How is your customer thinking, feeling, acting, behaving? What are they interested in? And if you can really kind of get your head around that, it helps you develop new products and it helps you communicate your product to your customer. So that's really kind of at the root of this presentation as well. So next slide, please. There's three things that we'll discuss today. One is we'll discuss some key data about the US market. Secondly, we'll highlight some of the best practices that I've seen in terms of brands, handmade brands who are leading in the market today. And then third, I'm just going to share some high-level recommendations of things that you all can think about in your business as you move forward tomorrow, next week, next month, and into 2021. Next slide, please. So in terms of the US today, we have 7 days left until a very important day in our history. So we won't dive into that topic right now, but for the very moment, these are absolutely unprecedented times. We have three things that are going on in the US right now. We clearly have COVID and the impact of the pandemic, which as the fall and winter starts to set in, we see a spike in cases. So we're expecting that there's going to be kind of further restrictions and kind of further isolation and quarantining of people. So we have that going on. We also have this election, which is, it leaves me speechless. It's just a time of such incredible engagement of more people in the US in terms of the important topics of the day. So that's a good thing. So very much though, from a market point of view, people are on pause for a lot of their decisions about buying, both on a personal level and on a company level. And the third is we've had some tremendous natural disasters. So just extensive forest fires in the western part of the US, as well as an incredible hurricane season that has affected the southeast fact. So the issue of climate change is very much at the top of people's minds. And it is such an unprecedented and extremely uncertain time. You can go to the next slide. That our lives today feel like a roller coaster in a way that they have not felt like in certainly my entire lifetime, probably more than that. So this uncertainty means that the attitude of both individual consumers and the attitude of commercial buyers is that we are hoping for the best and we're preparing for the worst, right? Because day to day, things change in a way that we can't predict. So one day seems like things are going well, the next day it feels like you're just diving off of a cliff. So it really feels like a roller coaster. If you listen to the news these days, you hear the words uncertain and unprecedented pretty much in every other sentence. So again, we're hoping for the best and preparing for the worst. So if you feel like you're in that same position, or if you feel like the people, the buyers you're reaching out to are not responding fast enough or not responding at all, just understand that they're living in that this same mentality of sort of hope for the best, prepare for the worst, and a little bit of being paralyzed in this era of uncertainty. So you are not alone in feeling that way. I think this is a sense that is, and a mentality and a psychology that's really impacting the whole planet today. Go ahead to the next slide. However, if we want some just like hard data, right? If we look at retail sales, they've kind of followed this V shape. So that's what's shown in the graph here. So these are retail sales. These are published by the US Census Bureau. So these are retail sales that include everything except automobiles. So we saw this huge dip. That the bottom of the V is in April of 2020. That's when US retail sales declined significantly. They declined by over 15%, and they really sent markets into a tailspin. I think this is right after this is when I gave that first webinar with Saitem in partnerships with Saitem. So at that time, 2/3 of our economy in the United States is dependent on retail sales, right? We are consumer economy. So when our retail sales dipped so tremendously, it set everybody into a panic. Fortunately, we saw a very quick and very sharp rebound off of this. So in May, sales were up. And again, by July of 2020, US retail sales had returned to the pre-pandemic levels. So that gave people a little more assurance that the economic impact of this of COVID hitting the market was going to be perhaps not as deeply felt as we had thought originally. So that's a good thing. However, we can go to the next slide. What we see is we see two things. So while US retail sales are back up to pre-pandemic levels, we see two things going on. And the first is that the way US consumers are shopping has changed. So one way that it's changed is that people are spending more time and they're spending more money online. So they're researching their purchases more, they're spending more time searching for purchases, they're looking at finding the best price, they're finding the most unique, right? Kind of all aspects of it, but they're spending more time and money purchasing online and shopping online, and researching online, and finding interesting stories online, and understanding the supply chain of a product online, right? Kind of the whole range. So we see that non-store retail sales increased by 25% when we look at July 2019 to July 2020. So a huge shift. You can go to the next slide. Another way that we see retail sales changing is where people are shopping. So from which brands. And we touched upon this a little bit last time, and it's only continued to expand. So what we see is that some of the models of department stores seem to just actually the model of a department store is really struggling in this market right now. Consumers are not as interested in going into that sort of one-stop shopping place because that was a physical place that you went to shop that way, and it's not as relevant today. We also see some of these um, significant national retail chains who have either shut their doors entirely or have declared bankruptcy. And you see some of the names of them here. Pier 1 Imports has now closed down entirely. They're shuttering all their stores. Neiman Marcus has declared bankruptcy. Brooks Brothers declared bankruptcy. Sur La Table declared bankruptcy and is closing 30% of their stores. J. Crew declared bankruptcy. J.C. Penney did as well and is shuttering, I think, 25% of their stores. And if we look at this, so many of these stores are actually the anchor tenants at shopping malls. So people believe that more than 25% of US shopping malls are going to close within the next 3 years. Other people think it's going to be much faster than that. So this whole notion of going to a shopping mall is not as interesting to US buyers, both because of COVID and actually most of these stores that you see listed here, and most of these large retail stores, national retail chains, discount retail chains, right? They were struggling even before the pandemic. So it's just like COVID accelerated their decline. And actually, we'll see here, even though I mentioned the discount stores, we see that the stores that are struggling are both the luxury stores, the mainstream stores, the mass market stores. They're both in home and they're in fashion. So there's sort of no real portion of the market that's kind of most impacted by this. It's really this idea that some of these stores got behind. Either they got behind financially or they got behind in terms of their brand. So they stopped being as relevant to the US consumer even before COVID. They were much more interested in sort of fast fashion, getting out the product as quickly as possible at the best price as possible without really investing in that unique product. Or they were kind of very much fixed on this in-person shopping experience and not being more dynamic with their customer in terms of interesting ways to tell stories and engage their customers digitally. So the challenge of all these big retail stores is that they are also impacting these shopping malls. We can go to the next slide. So here's what's happening. There's just this accelerating demise of shopping malls. And shopping malls were also the location of some independent retail stores or small retail chains. So 1/3 of the US malls are expected to close by next year. Sorry, I misquoted that earlier. And over 25,000 retail stores could close this year. And with 55 to 60% of those situated in shopping malls. So if we think about that, right, we know that shopping malls are becoming increasingly less relevant in the marketplace. Some of these major department stores and major retailers are not as relevant to customers. People are spending more time online. So we think, well, where are they shopping, right? If they're not shopping from these big retailers, who are they buying from? And the assumption is, and we have lots of anecdotal information around this, not a lot of statistical data because it's a little bit harder to track, but that consumers are making this very rapid shift to emerging brands, to independent retailers, to brands where you can see you have full transparency into their supply chain. They're more interested in supporting young and emerging and local companies. So we're making this shift where all of a sudden consumers are putting more time and dollars into small, independent, innovative, right, purpose-driven, smaller retailers and independents, which is a great opportunity for so many companies in the Philippines. Many of the companies in the Philippines, right, definitely relied on some of those large retailers, but you have such creativity in terms of your materials and techniques and brands that I think that the market is opening up to you, right? So you can see how this, both whether you were an established exporter or you're a new one coming onto the scene, there's been such shift in the market that it is creating opportunity no matter your level of experience selling into this market. So we can go to the next slide. So if we look at what people are buying, so we know how they're buying, right? How is more online, less at these bigger retailers, more at the smaller retailers and brands. What they are buying is, and we'll talk about more about this later, right? But we see that sales are strong or increasing for anything related to improving your home, improving your garden, anything related to grocery stores and preparing food at home, anything related to sporting goods and staying healthy and active during this time, anything related to hobbies and crafts, making things at home, and also interestingly, anything related to musical instruments. It seems to be people are entertaining themselves more at home. Sales are weaker or declining at department stores and also clothing stores. We see people spending less money on apparel than before. Go to the next slide. So amidst all this like flux and uncertainty and opportunities, right? There are some brands that are definitely excelling during these times. And there's some very clear things that they're doing. And I know we talked about some of these the last time we met, but they are still absolutely core to staying relevant in the marketplace today. So the first thing, you can go to the next slide, is that sellers are investing heavily in digital. So one is investing in, B2C, B2C retail platform, online retail platforms. So developing ways to sell directly to the end consumer. And we see that a lot in these independent retail stores, these smaller retail stores who had relied on that in-person shopping experience that was very personalized, and they have now opened up online stores. And I'll just note here that this doesn't mean that if you're an overseas producer, you should necessarily open up an online store, but just understand that your customer that you're selling to possibly is opening up an online store, right? So what is something you could do to help them? Is there any content you could provide, any pictures, any video you could provide that would help enrich their online store to help them sell more of your products? Go to the next slide. Another way that people are investing in digital is to just provide engaging content. So there are two examples here. One is with this company called Goop that's all about healthy lifestyles. You'll see they've run a whole series in their social media, which just introduces you to their team, right? You create this personal connection when all of a sudden you can meet the people that work there at Goop, which is, a brand that you followed and enjoyed and admired. It was actually founded by Gwyneth Paltrow, right? So she's quite a celebrity. But you get introduced to the rest of the team there. You get taken into their homes. You get to hear, personal things about how they're living at home and how they're living through this COVID time. This is an example here of a video of one of their staff who reorganized her whole closet during COVID. The other example is from Injiri, which is a beautiful luxury Indian textile and fashion brand. And they've used their social media channels to just create really interesting content that takes the customer through the path of the history of the product, right? The history of the textiles, the history of the techniques and the motifs and the materials. So they provide this very rich, more intellectual content about their product. Really you choose which one fits best in the personality of you and your company and your brand, but provide that kind of content that is not selling a product, right? But it's creating an emotional connection with your customer. And you all have such rich stories about yourselves and the techniques you work with, your design process, the artisans that you work with, the history of your craft in the Philippines. You have so much good content to share. Next slide, please. This was a really fun competition that this Indian rug brand did called Tantuvi. So engaging their customer by providing them with printouts of the designs of their rugs and inviting their customers to design some new colorways. So their customers would color in these pages, post them on social media, tag Tantuvi, and be entered into a competition for like a drawing over time. So yeah, it's a little commercial because you're trying to get people to to post and repost the name Tantuvi, but also it's just fun, right? It's providing something fun and interesting for your customers to do, which also explains our next example we can go to. So actually it doesn't, sorry. I thought there was another slide in there. So the second big thing, so one is using digital, right, in new ways and just more and engaging your customer. The second is around product innovation. So we have seen a huge number of manufacturers convert their manufacturing over to products that relate to safety. This is continuing. It will continue, I'm sure, for quite some time. So that's, we just have seen some very major brands say basically, it is time that we all come to the table and produce products that are related to safety and related to the needs of people today, given the reality of COVID. Next slide, please. Also, right, I think masks are going to become just part of our fashion accessories kit. I know I have dozens of them in my house right now. I have them made by artisan groups in different parts of the world. I have them, ones that we made at home with my kids this, over the summer and fall. And increasingly, there's these very high-end sort of shishi ones that you see. So you can see this idea of making masks is, you see it everywhere. You can buy it here at like the little, grocery store at the gas station, all the way up to Tory Burch or Rag and Bone, right? So you could spend $60 for your super like shishi fashionable mask, and you could also spend, probably $3.60 for a mask. So this is not going away, right? That's very clear to all of us. And so now that we're at the point where we're getting tired of them, it's a great time to come up with a new mask with a new story behind it, right? We are all talking about our masks every time we go out in public. So why not have a mask with an interesting story about where it comes from? So these are a reality. A lot of people think, at least here in the US, is that people are going to be wearing masks. We're all going to have a dozen masks at home, and we're going to start wearing them every time we go on an airplane, even after COVID. So I think this is a product that is not going away. Also, it's a product that just shows you're relating to your customer and what they need. Next slide, please. Another thing that we see is this whole idea of work from home. So we have seen company after company after company in the US, from Facebook to Google to Microsoft to investment banking firms, telling their employees that they should expect to work from home at least till the end of 2020. And some companies are even saying all the way through 2021. So everybody needs a way to modify their home to have a workspace that is inspiring, efficient, comfortable, and unique to them. So anything related to these kinds of home improvements that's adapting your home to this new reality of how we're living is extremely popular. There's like a shortage of there's a backlog of ordering furniture for people's homes these days in the US. So it's remarkable. Next slide, please. Here's some more products that just show you kind of examples. It doesn't have to be all furniture. It can be organizers, things that inspire you, artwork, right? People are refreshing their homes because they're just spending more time there. Next slide. Another thing regarding product innovation is to create products that are going to entertain people. So whether that's puzzles or games or craft activities, here we see a build your own bracelet kit, puzzles. You can go to the next slide. We see people not just selling masks, but actually selling kits to make your own mask at home. Here you see Urban Outfitters, which is one of the larger, trendier retailers in the US, and they have a whole category now on their website of games and activities, because this is such a huge category. People have been spending more time at home. Going into the winter, we are definitely going to be spending more time at home, because I think there's going to be more and more restrictions on our movement around and our ability to go out and to restaurants and entertain ourselves, to movies, etc. Next slide, please. Here's an example that I love. This is Meso Goods, which is a brand from Guatemala. They supply West Elm and other retailers in the US. And they sell wall hangings, but they also created this little kit so you can make your own wall hanging at home. So I encourage you to think, is there something in what you make and what you offer that you could package up some of your materials with some instructions so that people could try to make their own at home? Right? Is there a very simple basket weaving technique that people could learn? Is there, a weaving of natural fibers that somebody could make a bracelet with, or something to entertain their kids with, right? I think this is something that will definitely engage customers for quite a while going forward. Next slide, please. Just a couple of comments, everybody, particularly, I think there's a feeling right now that people are kind of at the end of their rope in terms of dealing with COVID and everything else that's going on in the US. So we're really looking for ways to like comfort ourselves and take care of ourselves. Lotions and candles and comfortable clothes. You can go to the next slide, please. Big fuzzy blankets for at home, slippers, candles, right? Anything that's going to make us feel less stressed, more loved, more relaxed, right? So even if this is how the images that you use to market your products, that's giving a real sense of serenity and peace and calm, is really important in this time. Next slide, please. And then just a couple of comments of other categories. So people are spending more time cooking at home. So anything related to sharing recipes, utensils, serving dishes, things that will inspire people to make meals at home, freshen it up, right? Serving dishes, napkins, placemats, tablecloths, right? People are eating at home more than ever. Anything related to the home, cleaning the home, caring for the home, spending time with family, exercise, getting out, keeping your mental health supported by exercise, and gardening. Although we're going into the winter season, I am sure next summer there is going to be a gardening frenzy, because people invested more time in gardening this summer because they were at home, and next summer they're going to be so excited because even if COVID has lifted quite a bit, people are going to get into this routine, right, of spending more time at home, spending more quality time at home, investing in their home. So I think that gardening category will continue to be strong. Next slide. So is there a silver lining? Yes, 100%, absolutely. We are seeing that the interest in sustainability is increasing at the highest pace we have seen over time. We see there is an incredible push to buy fewer, better things, to consume less and consume better, because people are spending more time researching their purchases and the impact of their purchases. So people are being more cautious about how they spend money, but they are spending money. They're spending money with more purpose-driven brands. So we can go to the next slide, which is all about and the interest in sustainability. If you haven't read the sustainability report yet, published by Williams-Sonoma, do it. It just so clearly explains what sustainability means to Americans today, which is really very broad. It's about taking care of the planet, taking care of people, and taking care of purpose. So it's a really, these are tenets of where the US consumer is headed, and a growing percentage of them. Next slide, please. And And this is a time more than ever where it is essential that you reactivate and restate and refresh your company's purpose. In doing that and in sharing it with your consumers and followers through your social media channels and digital marketing tools, it's a way that you can reassure people that you are still relevant in the marketplace and really kind of create a forward momentum for your business. If we look back to those companies that have really struggled during this time, those department stores and some of those national retail chains who are shutting down entirely or declaring bankruptcy, they lost their real clear vision and definition of the purpose of their company. They became driven by profit and not over purpose. It's extremely clear as we look back on them. So it makes it even more important that you stay relevant by refreshing, redefining, right? Come up, rewrite your mission statement, not in a way that's going to create the mission, but just has some new language and is a fresher way to describe it to people. Next slide. So the question is, what can all of you do right now? Right? Very clearly, we have said you need to stay connected to your customer through digital marketing tools and through innovating product. But here are 4 specific things that you can do. Go to the next slide. So the first thing that you can do is, as we just concluded, is refresh your purpose. So look at your mission statement, look at your brand statement, look at how you're describing your values as a company, look at the impact that you're making. How are you talking about it? Look at how you're talking about the production, your supply chain, and how are you managing issues as they relate to people and the planet, right? Go back and think about how are you talking about that? How are you using some of the language that you see in the sustainability report published by Williams Sonoma or other brands? Now is the time to do this. We have a little time, we have a little pause. It will help you engage with your customer. The second thing you can do is you can invest in digital. And this does not mean selling online, but it means refreshing your website. It means investing more in email marketing, right? Your customers are out there. They're in a position that's very similar to yours, which is confusion, right, around this uncertainty. So stay engaged with them through an email marketing campaign. And the other is through social media, sharing interesting content on your social media that, like some of the examples that we've shown earlier, really engages them. The third thing that you can do is you can innovate your product. So what can you create that responds to your customers' needs during this COVID time and into the future? Is that creating something that kind of addresses their lifestyle? Is that creating something that addresses their kind of interest in this greater good and in this purpose, right? Think about that. It's a time where you don't have to be perfect, right? It's not about perfection. It's about effort. Right? So it doesn't have to be the perfectly stylized product and finished product, but you want to show them that you are innovating, that you're responding to their needs and what's happening in the marketplace. And the fourth thing that you can do is that you can partner with your customer. So now more than ever is really thinking about your customer not as the person who's buying your product, but thinking about your customer as the person you're going to partner with to get through this time. And if you think about it that way, then you start thinking about what kind of content can you provide them, or is there a project you could develop together, right, that they can use in their marketing and promotion to stay engaged with their customer. So really thinking about your customer as your partner through this time and not as the person who's going to purchase your product. So that brings me to the end of my presentation. I thank you so much. We can show the next slide, which is my last favorite quote, which is the best way to predict your future is to create it. I think that this is probably one of the most relevant quotes of the time, is that this is not the time to sit back and wait for this to pass. This is the time to be active, try new things, make mistakes, stumble, engage, talk, and connect with your customers. That's what's going to keep you ahead of this. So thank you so much for this, and I look forward to a little discussion. Hopefully, I haven't spoken for too much past my time.
Well, Karen, that was a lot to chew on. I mean,
I know.
I'm glad that you spoke of all of these things. And even though you live so far and it's a little bit of a different market, I think that everything is applicable to all markets, you know. So at this point, I'd like to ask you a few questions. I mean, I already have questions, but there's so many things that I'd like to get into as well. But again, before we start, you may type because the viewers are the ones who have the businesses and really want to learn from you. So if you do have any questions, please type them in the chat box, either in the Facebook or Hopin platforms. And we're hoping to get all of the answers to all of your questions out there, because I mean, I'm just the moderator and I have so many questions. So I can only imagine how many questions are out there. But let's start with talking about mall culture. I mean, Karen, I even noticed that before COVID, a lot of these major brands, I mean, the brands that really, as you say, anchor the malls, you've got the JC Penney's, they were closing because I'm
Mhm.
assuming it was, more about profit over purpose, and
Mhm.
apart from other things, right? But we still have a strong mall culture here in the Philippines, although we were talking a lot about COVID um, in our dry run, and that's changed a bit for now. So for the brands now um, who do have their brick and mortar, but of course are focusing to online now, do they have to be focusing on both, or should they be, because strengthening digital is one of your key points, so should they be pivoting to just digital at this point?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. So I think digital is going to remain a more important tool into the future. That said, there's kind of two types of shopping that we see online. One is what we'll call chore shopping, right? Those are the products that you need to have, and so you're going to look for the least expensive or the more convenient way to buy them. I think those purchases are going to stay online in a bigger percentage. The other type of shopping is what we call the cherish shopping, right? So that's things that you really do want to have. You want to be able to touch and feel those products and have kind of a much more intimate like experience with the product than before you purchase it. So I think we'll see, for those specialty retailers who offer a really unique product that has a story behind it that people want to see, the handmade product, we're going to see a bigger portion of those going back to in-person shopping. I don't know if they'll how much will be at malls or other kind of, in-person events. That will be interesting to see. But I do think we'll see consumers going back to those products that are a little more specialized, a little more higher value, with the caveat that it's still digital is still going to be a big part of how they kind of learn about those brands and educate themselves on them.
Exactly. And in the Philippines, in the recent years, we've grown to love these pop-up events where
Mhm.
you don't necessarily get to get introduced to these beautiful artisan products in the mall, but it's really more of, you get to know them, you get to meet the person who actually created them. And I think that sort
Mm.
of puts the whole landscape into the lifestyle and what the
Yes.
brand is all about, and the whole purpose of the brand. So speaking of the consumer, because you are saying that partnering with the consumer is very important, but I also want to make sure that you don't lose yourself as a creator and as someone who's making something, because technically it's your product that you're trying to sell, so it has to be a
Mhm.
good balance, because you are talking about the attitudes of consumers changing because of COVID, because of climate change, because of so many different things. So how do you strike that balance of not sounding too opportunistic? I mean, of course, like, let's say you said that masks are everywhere, which is a necessity, so that's fine, right? And it's kind of, it's kitschy cool. You say that there's
Yeah.
someone who will be selling a mask for $100+ and you'll be selling a mask for, like, out here you can get one for as cheap as 250 pesos, and that's, it's just as good as well. So how do you strike
Yeah.
that balance without,
Mm.
without forgetting your brand, with addressing what the consumer wants? and without being opportunistic?
Yes, such a great question. I think probably starting off the process with that refresh of your purpose statements, right? Refreshing your brand statement, refreshing your mission statement, refreshing your values, and doing that exercise kind of like offline, right? Give yourself a day, a morning, a weekend, whatever it is, to really deep dive, do some kind of deep thinking about what do you see in the marketplace and what is true to you, and coming up with those keywords and key stories that you want to share with people. I think if you do it kind of not reactive, right? Not in that short-term reactive way, and do it in a way that's really true to who you are as a person. So not doing it impulsively, and also going through that brand refresh exercise will help you come up with some stories that are very authentically yours. I mean, customers these days are just smart, right? They start to see right away when your brand message that suddenly you're posting this week has nothing to do with the the stories that you posted 2 weeks ago. So you have to be just very true to yourself. Don't try to please everybody, right? But just really stay true to yourself.
Well, that's part of the beauty of knowing your market and knowing your
Yeah.
customers, because you can't please everybody, because let's say your because group is also very, very polarizing. You talked about the brand,
Yep.
but then again, there's also this authenticity that when you get to know, let's say, the people behind it, and they feel like real people and not just a brand masking as something of a
Hmm.
celebrity. So
Hmm.
maybe that's why some people really buy into that as well. But let's talk about sustainable production before we move on to, we have already a few questions, I believe, from those who are listening in today. So how do you educate people about sustainable production consumption patterns? Because this is something that we're leaning towards in the whole fashion industry, but it's not fully there yet. That regenerative sort of,
Hmm.
practice as well, and ethical practices of business design. And how do you encourage more businesses to get on board? I mean, given that maybe it may be at the beginning more expensive to set up, because usually when you do these things, and it's from the ground up, so you can't just go halfway. It's like an all or
Hmm.
nothing thing. Or can you start somewhere and just build from there?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think there's a lot of understanding with consumers that this is a process, right? That nobody's going to come out and be perfect. And we're all on that track, right? The consumer is on that, there's virtually no consumers out there who are 100% sustainable in how they're purchasing. So everybody is on this kind of spectrum, right? Where we're trying to improve, but so it doesn't have to be about perfection. In terms of educating the customer, I would align yourself with an ethical fashion or sustainable fashion organization that you really admire, or multiple ones, and cite articles that they've published. There's a lot of really interesting talk coming out from these different, there's Ethical Fashion Forum, Objective, Clean Clothes Campaign. There's so many of them. So I think align yourself with an organization that's providing some objective information to consumers, become a member of that organization, follow that organization, see how you can collaborate with that organization. So then the responsibility isn't yours to educate the consumer, and you kind of give that message to the consumer that you're educating yourself as well in this process, and invite them along in that journey.
Well, you're telling people to be part of sort of that community, or find the tribe,
Hmm.
right? Because you're still all
Yep.
learning from each other constantly, which is so funny, because now the floor is open to questions from people who are listening in. And the first question from Leilani La Chica is about the position of sustainable design for the better normal era. She's asking
Hmm.
you to expound on this further, and I think that you pretty much answered her question before she even got to ask it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's pretty
I
much
mean,
just
I think,
found the tribe, yeah.
yeah. So I think that, I think that, you know, there is a growing population of people who care about climate change, and who care about environmental issues, who care about sustainability. And so there's a growing number of people who care about it. And then there's also a growing depth of understanding of what it means. Right. So it's growing in two different directions. But I think it's a continuum. I think we're on a continuum, and virtually everybody agrees to that. Last year, there was, I think, 56 different major global fashion brands took a climate challenge to reduce carbon emissions by a significant amount by 2030, right? And so just that notion that they're doing it by 2030 makes everybody sort of understand that this is a spectrum. So
And I think that a lot of our audience today is also very much for the sustainability push, because whether it be them in the middle of their stride or just starting out, maybe this is the ethos that they want their company to have. So
yeah.
there's a question here from Adrian Cheruel. I would like to ask where high-end artisanal creations can be placed in the sustainability market. Items that are 100% handcrafted, creations that feature hand weaving, hand embroidery, and hand dyeing all in one piece. So this is a lot of the beauty of our products here from the Philippines. And you've got them, these fabrics, these creations have been passed on from generation to generation in the different tribes, and a lot
Yeah.
of our business owners are wanting to highlight that and help the communities as well.
Yeah, so I think, and if you read that Williams Sonoma report, you'll definitely see this. But I think the definition of sustainability is very broad in the United States. So it has a tendency to think about environmental issues and climate change. But if we actually look at the vocabulary that's used to kind of describe what sustainability means in terms of products in the market, we see handmade, handcrafted, natural materials, ethical, women made, fair trade, all of these terms kind of show up under this umbrella of sustainability. So I actually think that the sustainability movement is opening up more opportunity for people to see handmade products as being sustainable.
Right, we're going to shift a little bit now. The question is from Mary Mediatrix Villanueva. I was wondering if we should consider designing and producing products needed to hug the buyer. So it's again about the consumer and the relationship that you have to have with the consumer to comfort people undergoing bereavement or whatever they are during isolation. We were talking about COVID, Karen. I mean, and it's a blanket issue that all of us are having to deal with. And I think that the buying you were also talking about, we call it here plantita, people who are into plants, because tita means aunt. So,
Yeah.
or halamam, which is plant mom, because there are things that you sort of are getting into
Mhm.
and giving you that comfort or solace while you're on lockdown.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's universal. So I would suggest too, when you're coming up with those products and that messaging, that you show the customer that these are comforting to people in the Philippines, just like they could be comforting to people in the US or other markets, right? So you personalize it, right? This is something we developed to, comfort ourselves during this time. And we think it's of interest to, the bigger marketplace.
But how do you do that without also feeling like it's opportunistic is the word that keeps popping up in my head. I mean, it has to feel authentic.
Yeah, it does. And if you can explain and show it in a way that's useful to your community, your family, to you personally, if you can tell that story and show it through photographs, it will come across as authentic, right? Because, the unique thing about this time is that we are all in this together, right? We're all experiencing some range of the same emotions and lifestyle changes across the world, right? So I think it's an opportunity where you can really connect in an authentic way, because nobody's making up COVID in their community these days.
Exactly. And it goes back to your favorite quote from Peter Drucker about the target market. And if it fits them, it'll sell itself. So
Yeah,
that's part of the beauty of it. And this was a quote from how many years ago?
I would think it was like 20 or something, but it
And it's
still
still
seems so
applicable.
relevant to me. It's like, let's all just, put yourself, don't think about trying to sell to somebody, right? Create empathize with your customer, connect with your customer, ask questions of your customer, right? All of those things creates a connection. You get to know them better, they get to know you better, and you can create things that will sell well.
All right, so our next question is from Nicolas Delange. Our exports are B2B sales, and buyers from the US are not traveling to trade fairs or going overseas. So this is the question that has to do with, touching the products, feeling it, getting to know also the person behind it. How do you see this situation affecting the supply chain? How do the end consumers get relevant and innovative products through bigger stores that source overseas? Related to this as well, is there a pushback in the US versus China sourced products? So maybe let's do the US China thing after. So
Yeah.
go ahead.
So, so with regards to people not going to trade shows, right? Consumers in the US are still buying, right? So that means that the buyers at those stores are still purchasing products. They're purchasing them differently. They're purchasing different products. Some of their supply chain has they had production issues because of COVID, right? So they had to shift in front because of that. So you need to heavily rely on sending random boxes of courier samples to buyers that you have contact with so that they can feel and touch the products, because they're not going to do it at a trade show before. Don't wait for them to order samples from you. Invest in sending them a small package of samples or swatches or something that's going to help them touch and feel the product. So that's one thing. Stay in touch with them regularly through email marketing. In particular, that's the most effective for B2B, right? Is email marketing. Don't wait for them. Don't send off all these personal emails waiting for them to respond. Just have these beautiful, inspiring emails that are filling up their inbox, because there will come a time when they need to buy from you because they haven't gone to these trade shows, right? All these buyers haven't been traveling. So, and their sales are, in some cases doing quite well. So they need to buy, right? So make it easy for them. Have really good catalogs, order sheets, price lists, so it's easy for them to purchase. So that's one. In terms of how are consumers getting relevant information, right? Consumers are not purchasing as much in person right now, and yet they're still buying. So just know that. What kind of content can you provide to your wholesale buyers, the retail stores that are buying from you, that will help them convey the uniqueness of the product to their end consumer? So that's one. In terms of the US consumers kind of being anti-China, I haven't really sensed that yet. Although we have such a massive shift going on right now, so many of those large retail stores who historically bought from China, they are really struggling right now. So they're not purchasing as much from China. It's kind of like the smaller emerging brands who don't buy as much from China, in part because the minimums from China are so high. It's harder for them to buy from them. So there has been a shift away from Chinese suppliers. But I don't think it's actually an anti-China movement. That makes
Okay,
sense.
we have one more question from Medi Villanueva. Because of the difficult and uncertain situation that we're in, how big is the risk of post-paid shipments? So again, it also has to do with moving stuff around different countries, and we have so many restrictions right now.
Yeah, so that's a great question. And it seems like there was a huge number of issues with canceled orders, difficulty shipping things, orders that were prepaid but were never shipped, orders that were shipped and never paid for. A huge amount of that kind of happened kind of early in COVID and through the summer. It seems like there's a bit of catch up now, right, going on in the marketplace, where kind of supply chains have stabilized a little bit. Buyers have stabilized a little bit in terms of understanding really what kind of business they have. So I think it's going to be a little bit less of a concern into the future. But I would also just really spend your time researching how some of your target customers are doing these days, because some of these stores are not doing well, and just, read the market reports to make sure that you're not sending off big shipments to Pier 1 or some of these other companies that are in bankruptcy.
All right. Well, I mean, let's end on a positive note though. So maybe just your final words of wisdom, because you've seen it all. I mean, you've lived through a pandemic, still living through it, in these uncertain times for, we have a lot of small, medium, micro enterprises even, but
Mhm.
they want to make it. And a lot of them are doing well because of digital, because of online, because they're selling their story properly. But do you have hope that things are going to get better and soon?
So I have hope for all those entrepreneurs out there who have a real passion for their business and those real creative entrepreneurial skills to develop new products and develop new messaging and engage with our customers. It is your time in the marketplace, right? This a lot of the restructuring of the market, a lot of the companies that are declining right now are creating space in the market for those socially minded, individual, personality driven, authentic companies, right? Family run businesses who can tell their story of being a family run business for multiple generations and have it appreciated so much in the marketplace. This is not the time to sit back and wait for the opportunities to come to you. This is a time to go out and get creative and find them, because there's such shift and movement and restructuring of the market that there's new opportunities there. So I'm hopeful, right? I'm an optimist, but I do think that the silver lining of this um, COVID era creates more opportunities for artisan brands, socially responsible brands, you know, kind of brands with long traditions, with sustainable supply chains. I think the time is in the very near future for you.
I'm so sad that I have to let you go, Karen, because it's all the time, unfortunately, that we have for this morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm sure that everyone's really learned a lot. I mean, even myself, I'm not a business owner, but I have learned a lot as a consumer and maybe possibly a business owner
There
eventually.
you go. Good. Thank you so much for having me. I so appreciate this time to share my passion, and I believe in all of you and look forward to the next time we can get together.
Thank you so much once again, Karen Gibbs, for taking the time away from your very busy schedule to join us. I will let you go because it's, well, almost bedtime, right? So you need to
Yes.
rest.
Yes, we're getting there. Or a late dinner as it might be tonight.
But it's so funny though. My room looks, we're morning here. My room looks like it's nighttime, and you are
I
evening, and you look like you have natural sunlight coming in. What is that about?
just like I tried to choose something that looked a little cheerful, so it wasn't like I was in my dark room.
Well, it was cheerful indeed, and your
Good.
insights on business models of the future are so much appreciated, and we'll be sure to take them into account as we move forward amid these unprecedented times, as you say as well. Thank you, everyone
Yes.
who joined us this morning. This has been Lexi Schultz. Have a great day, everybody, and stay safe.
Thank you.